You may think it strange that I've chosen to open this new season of Young People's Concerts with the subject of teachers, because after all, aren't these programs always about music? And what have teachers got to do with music? Well, the answer is everything. We can all imagine a painter who's self-taught, or a writer, but it's almost impossible to imagine a professional musician who doesn't owe something to one teacher or another. The trouble is that we don't always realize how important teachers are in music or in anything else. Teaching is probably the noblest profession in the world, the most unselfish, difficult, and honorable profession, but it's also the most unappreciated, underrated, underpaid, and underpraised profession in the world. And so today we are going to praise teachers.
Oh, who could have put it any better than our dear old Lenny Bernstein? Well, tonight we're going to talk with one of the best teachers we know in the art of choral directing in our high schools, Dr. Richard Nickerson. Thank you so much for coming out on a very blustery October evening. First, let us give us a round of applause for our sponsor this evening, Horch Roofing. And to, of course, the Lincoln Theater for hosting this evening's event. And for Damon up in the lighting, who has put all of this together. Thank you so much, Damon. This is the last in this series of musical talks and intimate conversation, and I'm so pleased to have with us Dr. Richard Nickerson. I've been a wonderful admirer of his for such a long time, because as you heard Lenny say, that teaching is one of the most noblest of all professions. I don't know what his pay is or whether or not he is underpaid, but he certainly is admired by many, internationally, nationally, and certainly locally here in Maine. We're going to talk to him just a little bit about how he went from just having 9 girls in his choir to having over 250 in his chamber, Windham Chamber Singers. So if you would give a great round of applause, we're going to welcome Dr. Richard Nickerson here tonight and have a wonderful, intimate conversation with him. Well, thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Great.
It's great to be here.
Great, great, great. Well, let's start at the very, very beginning. Thank you so much. That's right. I usually ask how it was that you came into the life of music, but I understand that at a very early age, even though you don't remember too much about it, but that even though your siblings are not very musically inclined, your mother was, but that your first musical baptism, so to speak, was not in the concert hall, but the dance hall, and that your father was actually a square dance caller. Is that correct?
That's what they tell me, yeah.
A square dance caller.
Yes.
And did that have any influence at all on you? I mean, did you pick any of that up?
Again, that's what they tell me.
That's what they tell you?
I don't remember. I couldn't call a square dance right now.
Oh, okay.
If that's what you're...
All right. So if we pulled one up, you wouldn't be able to do it.
I would not, no.
No. But was he musical at all?
My dad was musical. He was a singer. He was actually, funny story, when I was getting ready, when I was in high school auditioning for the Maine All-State Choir, we had an old album. It was a 1959 Maine All-State Choir, and I'm looking, I see my dad's name. I said, "Dad, you made All-State?" He said, "Yeah, I did." And I tell my students this story all this time. I said, "Don't you have to sight read to make All-State?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "You don't read music?" He said, "Nope." I said, "Well, how did you do it?" He said, "Well, I looked at the notes, and if they went higher, I sang higher. If they went lower, I sang lower." I said, "But how do you know how much?" I wasn't getting it. He said, "Well, if they went a little bit higher, I sang a little bit higher. If they went a lot higher, I sang a lot higher." And so I guess it worked. Yeah.
But that says quite a lot for the Thin Red Line. I mean, there are many tenors that I've had in choirs who are probably one of my best sight readers, and they have said that they don't read music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that is.
I don't either. I don't either, but
They say tenors are the chosen breed.
The tenors are the chosen breed. Yeah. But however, jumping ahead, in your teens, you switched to a different style of music altogether. So the hair that we see here quickly grew, and you went from square dancing to rock and roll. And in your late teens, you actually had a very successful local band called Soundtrack.
Yes.
Now, who are you? Which one are you in this?
Let's see, the second one from the left.
Second one from the left, right here? Yeah.
Yeah, that's me.
Wonderful.
That's me.
Where was this?
That actually was a band I played in high school. That was the big gig at the Holton High School cafeteria.
In Holton?
In Holton, yeah.
Holton.
Yeah.
Now, I spent a little bit of time in Holton, and I remember that in October you took 3 weeks off to potato pick.
Yes.
And it was as vast as you could imagine. How long did you live in Holton? You went to school there? Did you graduate from Holton?
I graduated in the class of 1981.
1981. Yes. Fantastic. But this is not the band Soundtrack.
No, the previous picture was the band Soundtrack. But actually, Soundtrack, we were a band made up of music majors at the University of Maine.
Oh.
We were gigging 5-6 nights a week. I was able to actually pay for school in that band.
Not bad.
Yeah, it was a great... but as I tell students today, it's an awfully difficult way to make a living. So it's great when you're 21.
Right. Right. And what year was that when you were doing that?
That was the early 80s.
The early 80s.
Yeah.
Now, what kind of music? Were you covering or were you doing original?
We do mostly covers, top 40 covers.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Wow.
And having a ball.
Well, what was amazing in researching your early years, on Facebook, you partook in a sort of a little fun little game where you were supposed to list the top 10 most influential cover albums. Now, what was amazing about this is all of those cover albums that are up there are rock and roll. But there was one that stood out right in the middle.
Yep.
Now, if you look at all of them, we have everyone from Rush, Bill Chinook, we've got April Winds, we've got Boston and Toto, Jethro Tull. How did Benjamin Britten, Rejoice in the Lamb, get in with Kiss? Can you tell us how that happened?
Well, that's a great... You've done your homework.
Well,
wow.
How do you go from rock and roll to choral?
Okay, now remember, this exercise was one that you had to list the albums that were influential.
Right.
Okay. Kiss, I came to know Kiss in middle school, or what we call junior high. I was fascinated with the theatrics. And that's this whole creating a persona. I was just fascinated with it. It scared me a little. What I liked about Kiss's music is it was so darn easy that I could actually play it.
Sure.
And that was nice. The Britain is a great story here. After my junior year of college, I was playing a lot with Soundtrack, and I would say I was really focused on my college studies. And I was much thinner than I am now, and I suffered a collapsed lung. Oh. Pretty serious. Had to take a semester off from college, and during that semester, I discovered the Britain Rejoice in the Lamb. And I listened to that recording over and over, and I credit that piece with, in many ways, just saving me. And just, that was, there were certain times in my life, certain pieces that, that just really spoke to me and gave me hope. And, you know, whether it's the music of Britain or maybe the text of Christopher Smart. If you also remember with this exercise, I also said I couldn't limit it to 10. Right. There's no way, and I was going to do 15. The other one, the next one that was going up that I just got too busy to put up was the Shaw recording of the Brahms Liebeslieder. That's where I discovered Brahms.
Right. So, do you still perform Rejoice in the Lamb?
I just did it last year. Yeah.
So it's still a staple.
It's still a staple. High school students love it. It's great. It's just rhythmically, it's so exciting for them. It's so vibrant, and it's probably one of my favorite pieces.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, looking at the rock and roll, now knowing that you are a choral director, you must have been in heaven when it all came together and you did that tribute to Queen with Masterstroke.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. Well, I'll go back even a little further.
Okay.
Because when I started teaching, getting very involved in the choir, the one thing that we don't get to do as choir directors is play. So I had gone a long time without playing guitar. And this is kind of ironic. You see in the upper right-hand corner, the Boston album. Well, the drummer for Boston, Jeff Neal, is the history teacher at Windham High School. And Jeff, when he came to Windham, he wanted to start a faculty band. So we started a faculty band, and we played once a year for the students. And when we played, I remember just feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, just that thrill of actually making music. It's one thing to wave your hands. It's another thing when you're actually making the music.
Right.
So that was pretty special. But the Queen concert,
yeah.
One of the things I'm always looking for are opportunities for my students to give them, and as I had mentioned to you earlier, I go into any situation and look, okay, here's a challenge. How can I make this happen for my students? So my wife and I had gone to this concert at the Portland House of Music and saw this amazing Queen tribute show. And I'm watching this thinking, the only thing this needs is a choir. So I called the lead singer and said, I want to put that same show together at Windham, only I want it to be choir. And we put that together. I'll tell you what, I had a newfound respect for the music of Queen, because that's some of the most difficult music. I'll tell you what, Benjamin Britten is a lot easier to prepare than Queen.
The Queen. Yeah. Well, something happened in Aroostook County that changed your life forever. We know that you graduated.
Yep.
Well, we're not getting too personal here, but you graduated from Holton High School. So how does one go from rock and roll all night to Ave Verum? What was it that changed the course of your life through music?
It's funny. I get asked that question a lot, believe it or not. And it's not often that you can pinpoint one precise moment. My junior year in high school, I was accepted into it was my first festival experience. I was accepted into the All Aroostook Chorus. We're at Van Buren High School. There is such a thing as the All Aroostook Chorus. Right. And coming from a high school where I was the tenor section. Now, you didn't hear that wrong. Okay?
Right.
I didn't just sing that. I was the tenor section. And the conductor was this new conductor at the University of Maine, Dr. Dennis Cox. He was just brand new to Maine, and he was on fire, and he was our guest conductor. And he came in, and I remember it in such great detail. We were doing the Mozart Laudate Dominum from the Solemn Vespers, and it starts out with this gorgeous soprano solo, and then the choir comes in, Gloria Patri et Filio. And he said, okay, we're going to start 2 ahead of the choir entrance. And this was the first thing we did. And the piano comes in, and the choir comes in, and I had this surge go through my body like I didn't know what had hit me. It was the first time I'd heard this full SATB sound, and it hooked me right then and there. And I'll tell you, it was that moment I decided this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I was set to go to Berkeley. I was going to be the next Eddie Van Halen. I was just sure of it. But that precise moment, I decided this is what I want to do. And so I got to spend the weekend in the choir and get to know Dr. Cox. And he, as I say, he was a new conductor. And he said to me, next week we're doing Elijah in Orono. And the tenor soloist was a friend of mine, a choir director in Holton. He said, why don't you come down with him? Why don't you drive down with him and you can sing in the chorus? Junior in high school, and I went and sang Elijah, and yeah.
And that was
and it's just amazing what a major influence Dr. Cox had in my life.
Yeah, yeah. after school, how did you end up at Windham?
After I graduated from Maine, I took a one-year position at Bangor. It was just a one-year position due to a sabbatical. I knew it was only 1 year. My plan was I was going to go back to school and get a master's degree. And Dr. Cox had encouraged me. He said, you should really get a resume together and just apply for jobs, start interviewing. And so it was a very different time. We're talking the mid-'80s.
Right.
I applied for 4 jobs. I was offered 5 jobs.
Okay.
So, yeah, there was the superintendent that called me and said, I need a music teacher. If you want it, it's yours. Can you imagine that today?
No.
Yeah. So I really got to sit down with a map and say, first of all, where do I want to live? I love the fact that Windham was right next to Portland, but Windham also had a high school job. You know, there were a lot of junior high jobs that were available. Windham was a high school, and in my experience at the University of Maine, one thing that we were always taught is of how to network and learning who the music teachers are in every town, and there was a great deal of pride with that. I remember when I moved to Windham. The day I moved to Windham, I had my Toyota 510 packed all through, and I drive in and I come to the sign, "Welcome to Windham." It's August of 1987, and I drive in and I remember saying out loud, "Wow, I'm the choral director in this town," and it just gave me a sense of pride.
Yeah. Wow. Good for you. So you first come to Windham High School.
Yeah.
And you had, now is that 1988? Is that, yeah.
Fall of '87 would have been the class of '88.
Okay.
Yeah.
You had a booming chorus of 9 girls.
Yeah.
9 girls.
Yeah.
So put it into perspective. This is not back when you had computers.
No.
This is back when you had the open gym, I would imagine, and students came to each table to sign up for classes.
Yeah. Yep.
How did you recruit?
Well, let me back up just a little.
Okay.
I had 9 girls. We were able to recruit, and I think by the end of the year we had maybe 20 girls.
20 girls.
20 girls and 2 guys. And we did some nice repertoire, and those students really by the end of the year had really felt like they had accomplished something, that they were going in a good direction. And I don't know what I was thinking. I said, you know what? Next year, we're going to New York City. They said, okay. And I said, but we need more singers. And so I had a couple of very enthusiastic singers. We go in for they called it arena scheduling. And I had students that were just, have you ever considered signing up for choir? And students who'd never sung a note in their life. And I go back the next fall, and I've got 150 singers. Probably 110 of them had never sung a note in their or probably more than that. Probably like 140 had never sung a note. I used to joke I had an SATBR choir.
SATBR.
Soprano, alto, tenor, bass. Then I had this just rumble that just kind of permeated the floor. I don't know about that. Yeah. There was a lot of enthusiasm in that choir, and we did go to New York City.
You did.
We did, and performed as part of a festival, and it just built from there.
Right. Oh, it built all right.
Oh yeah, and Windham was a very different town. It really was. We were a school when I started there. We were just over 500 students. We're over 1,100 now.
Right.
So it's very different.
Right. Yeah, I had noticed that. And they affectionately call you Dr. Nick.
Yeah.
But you started out as Mr. Nick.
Mr. Nick. Yeah.
Mr. Nick.
Yeah.
Did the students name you that, or
they did, and I took great offense to that at first.
Oh.
Yeah. Only because when you come in as a 24-year-old teacher, you're not that far removed from the students, and I thought that they should call me Mr. Nickerson because that was a sign of respect.
Oh yeah.
And it took me a while to warm up to that.
Really? Yeah. But now you love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course. Right. So things are going well, and not much longer from where 1988 is. In 1995, you and your singers receive an invitation. At least that's how I heard it.
Yeah.
Did you receive an invitation, or did you apply to compete?
No. the thing about being a high school choral director, we say before email, your mailbox would just get filled with all of these invitations.
Right.
And we used to joke about it, you've been selected, you've been invited. And basically what it always meant is if you could come up with the money, you could do this.
Right.
And so we didn't take a lot of those invitations seriously. Well, I have this friend, we were working on our master's degrees together over the summer at Orono, and we get together, once every summer and just kind of talk about what our choirs have done, what we're planning on doing. And I mentioned this invitation. We were recording a CD at the time, and I mentioned that we had gotten this invitation to this festival, but I'd heard about the festival. I'd read a Reader's Digest article about the festival. It's called the International Youth Music Festival in Vienna, and her face just lit up, and she said, "If you get an invitation to that festival, they don't invite it. They only send out 20 invitations per country.
Wow.
And if you get an invitation, you would need to really look up that festival." So I did, and sure enough, it was legit.
Great.
Yeah.
So at that moment, you were at such a level that you did receive that invitation.
Yeah, it came from we had performed at a professional conference in New York the year before.
Right. So it just didn't fall out of
yeah.
the sky. To compete, and I have down here at the International Youth Festival, Music Festival in Vienna, Austria. Now, to raise money, most schools hold bake sales, car washes, put on a talent show. Now, looking back, it seems innocent at the time, but you went into the recording studio to record a Christmas album, or had you already started to do that?
We had started recording an album. I had a friendship with Roy Clark, now not the guitar player. Roy Clark is the producer for Rick Charette and had done all of Rick Charette's albums, and Rick and Roy are both based in Windham. So we had worked a couple projects together, so I had approached Roy about maybe doing a CD. And we were thinking something, just for family and friends, just for kind of I called it, I think I initially called it a choir yearbook.
Right.
So Roy and I were having lunch, and I was telling him about this invitation. And I just had this crazy idea. Could we ever use this CD as a fundraiser? And so the wheels started to turn, and we decided we were going to invest some money in this, maybe call in some favors for some friends. And again, this is 1995. Choirs weren't doing CDs in 1995, and they certainly weren't doing highly produced CDs.
Right.
So we came up, and I'm sure Roy must have just laughed when he heard this. I went home, he gave me some numbers, and I went home and ran some numbers, and I said, I got it all figured out. If we can sell 10,000 copies of this in 5 weeks, we'll raise enough for every kid to go to Vienna, and nobody has to pay anything.
Say those numbers again.
10,000 copies in 5 weeks. Now,
let's put this into perspective here, because I've been a recording artist for many years. Okay, 10,000 CDs. That is something that a normal recording artist, let's say, even around here in Maine, who have been recording all their life, that's a dream to sell. In 5 years, you were putting it in 5 weeks. 5 weeks at 10,000 copies.
There's something to be said for being naive.
How did you do?
We did it.
You sold 10,000 in 5 weeks.
We sold 10,000 in 5 weeks.
Right.
But I was just thinking what you were saying. We had this big meeting with the parents. We're going to fundraise, how we're going to market it. And I'll never forget this. One of the mothers raises her hand, and we're coming up with different ideas of how we can market this CD. And this mother said, "What's this new thing I keep hearing about called the internet?" Okay. And after a little discussion, we agreed that the internet probably wouldn't help us in selling 10,000 copies in 5 weeks, so we just abandoned that idea. So this is pre-internet.
And there's a very humorous story that you were telling me about. We were listening to a track just beforehand, and you were listening to it as you were walking in, Carol of the Bells. At the time, WHOM, they play a 48-hour, well, no, they play it through the whole Christmas season.
Start for Thanksgiving.
They play loops and loops and loops and loops and loops of Christmas music. And they have been playing for many, many years that same CD. And could you tell the story about you actually hearing your own choir?
I was just driving down don't know where I was driving, and I just love Christmas music, so I always have that station on, and all of a sudden it starts, and every choir director knows it. Hark, how the bells, sweet. And as I'm driving, I realize it's an a cappella choir, and I'm thinking sopranos are flat, basses are behind. I don't like that tone quality at all. And that was the Windham Chamber Singers.
Yes. You didn't even realize you were listening to
No.
Oh, yes. That's the same story that when Tchaikovsky had gone to a concert and he was listening to a piece, and afterwards someone had said, "Maestro, how did you like that piece?" And he said it was just absolutely terrible. And they had told him that it was his own piece.
Okay.
So you go to Vienna.
Yeah. I just would like to say, the reason we were able to sell 10,000 copies, and this has really been kind of the foundation of what has made this choir so successful, is the support that we've received.
Right.
Just not only from our own community, but from the entire state of Maine.
Right.
You know, Borders bought a half hour of prime time, and because we already had the audio done, we did a television special where we just put them in the studio, and they kind of mouth the lip syncing to the audio on there, and I don't want to think how many copies that would have helped sell.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that not only was Windham proud of the chamber singers, I think Maine on a whole was proud of the chamber singers. Yeah. Yeah. So you go to Vienna.
Yeah.
How many choirs were competing from around?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I want to say maybe 25 or 30.
25 or 30. That's impressive.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And it wasn't just choirs. There was choirs, orchestras, and bands.
Right. And you perform Beethoven's Choral Fantasy.
Yeah.
In German. In German. How did you do?
At the festival?
Yeah.
We won. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the night we arrived, the directors went to a reception at the mayor's, the mayor of Vienna hosted a reception, and all the other choirs came, or all the other choir directors came in their native costume.
Oh.
And I remember walking in, having that feeling like we're in over our heads.
Yeah. There you are again.
I think that was the first time I have this tagline I like to use, because it's held right through. Not knowing what's going to happen, we're getting ready to perform. We've got to go in, and it was like 11 o'clock in the morning, and we've got to perform for this panel of judges, and we're starting with the Beethoven Choral Fantasy. And so we're backstage, and I'm looking at the choir, and none of us really know what we're getting into, and I just looked at them and said, "Okay, don't mess up." And away we went.
But most of the time, that's really what happens. You go in with no expectation, you just go in for the fun of it, and you win. But coming from America, going over to Vienna on their soil, and you come back with a prize, you're almost like the Van Cliburn of the high school choirs, right?
I don't know about that. But
yeah, you don't know, you did. So let's watch a little video of the coverage back then in '85 of you winning.
Is going to the Windham.
This makes it worth it all.
This makes it really worth it all.
When the choir left for Vienna, they rode away to the sound of cheers and fire engine sirens. When they returned to Maine, the entire town was waiting.
The entire state was reveling in the success of this miraculous band of music makers.
And they have made Windham a little town in an obscure state of Maine that people go, "Oh, do you still wear shoes?" You know.
I think it's going to change their lives.
Pulling up off the exit in Gray, 2 o'clock in the morning, lights everywhere. I mean, it looked like some type of accident. Police lights, fire lights.
As soon as we got up the Gray exit, I started bawling because I thought that everyone would just, go to bed. I didn't realize how big of a deal this is going to be.
Yeah. What was it like coming back to your hometown?
Well, again, you have to put things into perspective. Remember, this was pre-internet.
Yeah.
So we didn't know what was going on back home.
Yeah.
Channel 13 had really taken an interest in this story, and to this day, Kim Block tells me that one of their big regrets is not sending a reporter with us. But there was a reporter who worked for the Associated Press that was with, she was a special to the Press Herald, so she was doing stories back, and we did a couple live interviews, but that was really the only connection we had back home.
Yeah.
So we had no idea.
Yeah.
But it was pretty incredible. Like I said, arriving home at 2 o'clock in the morning because of flights being delayed and all that. We get to the lawn at Windham High School, and the entire lawn is covered, with people. 2 weeks after that, the first story you heard, that was General Norman Schwarzkopf,
right,
who did a segment for the NBC Nightly News called Schwarzkopf's America, which was just cool things happening in small town America. So he came to Windham and spent the day with us.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, from there, you become the Windham Chamber Singers, not just here, but nationally. Here you are, you were invited to
the White House.
The White House.
Yeah.
Yep. And you've conducted since then your choirs at Carnegie Hall. The list of accolades go on in 18 states, 4 Canadian provinces, and correct me if I'm wrong, 8 European countries, leading the Magic of Christmas Choir. In fact, you're doing it again this year.
Chamber singers are doing the Magic of Christmas.
Right, and they are the guests.
They're the guest choir, yes.
Choir this year. The Boy Singers of Maine, which you've held the position of from 2001 to 2008.
Yes.
And
2009.
2009. And after you had come back, I think you were even on the Today Show. So let's watch you performing on the Today Show.
Holy name, hallelujah. Praise, praise, praise the Lord. Praise God's holy name, hallelujah. 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 Praise, praise, praise the Lord. Praise God's holy name, hallelujah. Praise, praise, praise the Lord. Praise God's holy name, hallelujah. 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 Luelo, Señor, lueso se nom, hallelujah. Luelo, Señor, lueso se nom, hallelujah. 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 Praise, praise, praise the Lord. Praise God's holy name, hallelujah. Praise, praise, praise the Lord. Praise God's holy name, hallelujah. 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 Praise God's holy name, hallelujah.
And that was Easter morning, the day that you went to Carnegie Hall?
Yeah.
Right, Carnegie Hall. How many times?
We've been there twice. That was the first time. Yeah, wow. Just realizing the seniors that were in that choir you just showed are about to turn 40.
Yeah.
At the end,
but we never age.
Oh no,
it's just the students.
Amazing story. What you just showed, the student that was in the very center, Daniel Strange. He's now professor of jazz at the Frost School of Music, University of Miami.
Yeah. Dan was at USM when I was there too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And when that particular video kind of gets me because what you don't know is when the percussion comes in just over the percussionist's right shoulder, that's my mom standing there, smiling, and she passed on Christmas Day 2013. So it's yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, such memories.
Yeah. So this picture you're looking at, this was from 2016. We put together a choir, a mass choir of 200 voices made up from all singers from Maine that we call the Maine Festival Chorus, and did a program at Carnegie Hall.
Yeah.
That was a great night.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah. Incredible. Incredible. Well, then you were also in New York, and you performed Peace on Earth, which I think is very apropos in the times we're living in right now. So let's listen to you performing Peace on Earth at St. Pat's.
what's funny about that? We had done a full 45-minute concert of sacred music, and it was mostly Palestrina. You know, there's some, like I say, just a cappella sacred music. And the thing that you don't calculate when you're doing the program is, especially St. Patrick's, there's no applause.
Right.
So you usually put an extra 2 minutes in there. You know, well, you don't have that. So all of a sudden you've got this full program. Well, we've got 10 minutes left. Right. And there's no way we're leaving. We've got 10 minutes to make music, and so I'm going through the whole program. And that one we just kind of did on the spot. You see me over-conducting because it's not an a cappella piece, but you know what? We're here. We're going to make it an a cappella piece. And,
yeah, that's incredible. So getting to your choral activities, Director of Choral Activities at Windham, there are actually two separate choirs, I should say, that that one you have to audition for.
Yes.
The Windham Chamber Singers.
Right.
And one that is a part of the school curriculum.
Yeah, entry level, yeah.
Right. Could you explain just a little bit about that? How you get into the Windham Chamber Singers, and what sizes there are, and you were explaining it a little bit beforehand, and it was fascinating to me.
When you said the 250 singers, that's not the chamber singers.
No, right.
We have an entry-level choir that can meet in different sections. It's really opened up to a lot of possibilities of things that we can do. And that group ranges anywhere from, 150 to 250 students. That's part of the regular school day. They take that class for credit. It can be repeated for credit. Anybody in that class can audition for the chamber singers. But you have to be, as we say, you have to be part of the curricular choir to be part of the extracurricular choir. Once a student comes into chamber singers, they're on what we call contract. And every student has to meet not only musical expectations, but there are expectations outside. Because we recognize what this group means in the community. And that I think one of the biggest ones we have is what we call the citizenship clause. They're expected to behave in a certain way.
What I really admired about one quote that you said in an interview is that you're not just trying to create good singers, you're trying to create good people.
Yes.
Good
absolutely,
students and
absolutely.
good people.
Most of the students that come through my classroom are not going to major in music, nor should they.
Right.
But there are things that they can get from the choral experience that they can take to every aspect of life. For example, in chamber singers, we rehearse once a week from 4 to 7. I start at 4. I don't start at 4:01. I don't start at 3:55. I start at 4 o'clock. And if a singer is habitually late, I have been known to lock the door at 4 o'clock.
Right.
Okay? Because if you're having trouble getting here, you need to get here. You need to leave earlier. You know, we can argue whether that's over the top or not. But once they develop that habit of showing up on time, once they go in the real world, that's gonna benefit them.
Have you ever had to release someone from the chamber singers due to grades or? Yeah.
Yep, I have. It's not an easy thing to do. Sometimes they have to work for it. Sometimes students, you know, for whatever reason, if they fail out, we give them an opportunity to down the road remediate that and get back in.
And to be in the chamber singers, do they also have to be in the, what was the first group that
the concert choir.
The concert choir.
Yes.
They do.
Yes.
So they can't just graduate and say, well, I'm in the chamber singers.
No.
Yeah.
No. And with chamber singers, we re-audition every year.
Every year?
Nobody's acceptance is guaranteed.
Wow. Great lessons. Yeah.
Yeah.
Life lessons.
Yes. You know, one thing that's kind of paramount to my philosophy is I'm trying not to teach music to kids, but trying rather to teach kids through music.
Right, right. And I understand that there's a fellow teacher, Lorna Dunn, at your school, or was at your school?
Oh yeah, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And does she teach or did teach?
She does, yeah, yeah.
special ed and that you work closely
Yes.
with her, and she had high praise for you, pairing special needs students with your regular ed student, and that she had described the transference of your methods in the classroom out into the everyday interaction between students, and that you have a philosophy that I believe is the foundation of teaching, whether it be in the arts or any other type of education, which is never single out a student.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So would you say that to be a good teacher, you have to be a good believer?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. In that student?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. In the
That's
student.
what I mean.
Yeah. You have to believe in the student, but I think the challenge in teaching is you have to get the student to believe in themselves.
Right.
That's one thing that I struggle with all the time is when you want something more than they do.
Yeah. Yeah. And for them to see it in themselves.
Yeah. Like you were saying earlier about when we have to release a student from chamber singers. I can help you with this. I can help you with that. But ultimately, you've got to do it. And that's kind of how choral music works. Anyway, when you think of it as the conductor, looking at myself as the conductor, I'm the one least capable of changing the sound. I can talk about it. I can move in different ways. I can use all the analogies I want. I can come up with all my great baseball analogies. But in the end, I can't do it.
Right.
They have to do it.
Right. Yeah. There was great affection when I kept putting up posts on Facebook that you were going to be my next guest, and how many students just came out of the woodwork and were tagging other students and saying, "Look who's going to be Aaron's next guest, and do you remember when we were doing this, and look who's in this, and whatever." And it brought up the film that I remember coming out years ago, Mr. Holland's Opus, and it reminded me that you were a Mr. Holland's Opus.
I have a Mr. Holland story.
But you do?
I do.
Mr. Holland's Opus, for a lot of students, you have that great sentimentality and that great memory for a lot of students.
Yeah.
Do you have a story of?
That was very profound, and this is kind of humorous in a way. When Norman Schwarzkopf did that story, the producer, a couple weeks after that story had aired, because he was also picked up by United Airlines. You know how in the airlines they'll show human interest stories. So the millions of people that have seen that story just kind of astounds me. Well, the producer called me and said, "I just want to give you a heads up. There's some people in Hollywood that really like this story, and they're thinking this would make a great movie."
There you go.
So for about a week, I'm going around, gee, I wonder who's going to play me.
Yeah.
And then he finally calls and said, well, they decided to pass because it was too closely related to Mr. Holland's Opus. Was it Get Smart, missed it by that much?
Missed it by that much. Well, yes, and there was a question that along the teaching line, because there's another movie in that similar vein, but it has just the opposite connotations. And everybody was praising this movie, and I actually detest this movie, and I just wanted to get your read on it. What did you think of the movie Whiplash?
I felt very uncomfortable with that movie.
Thank you. Okay, because I didn't like that movie at all. Trying to raise someone up by beating them down.
It made me very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah. Okay.
And I had the same reaction because when I went, I had heard great things. And I actually, in a rehearsal like the week before, a bunch of my students had seen it, and I had this thing that I kept saying because they kept dragging. It's like, my tempo, my tempo. And they started laughing. I said, well, that's a line from the movie. You'll get it when you see it. And then when I saw it, it's like,
yeah. Now, with most singing groups, and I don't know if this is something that you go through or not. It certainly did with me, because once you set that precedent, I don't know if you have to continue that understanding. But for me, hearing the Windham Chamber Singers for the last, how many years now? 30?
31.
Right. When you hear a certain group, you think they never change. When you hear that name, you don't understand that you are dealing with students that go through a cycle of 4 years.
Yes.
Sometimes even a year. So when you think of, and I'll humorously say the Von Trapp family, you think you're going to go and see the Von Trapp family. You don't go and open the program and say, well, Gretel and Fritz aren't up there because they failed out of geometry.
Right.
Or you don't go to see NSYNC and Joey Fatone. Sorry, Joey Fatone isn't up there because he graduated.
Right.
With you, the Windham Chamber Singers has a level of quality and revere that each year people expect to hear simply because it's the Windham Chamber Singers. Do you ever, as the director, I'm sure the students don't because they're just happy to be in it, do you ever worry that you have to tote that line of continually bringing it up to where it was the last year and keep it going, simply because it is that name?
I don't. You know, we audition in the spring, and I kind of know what's coming up.
Yeah.
I know now what's coming up, and I've got students that, you know, older students that are going to be at that proficiency level by next spring.
How's your chorus this year, just for example?
They're good.
They're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're having a good time.
Good.
It's as I like to say, I'm living the dream.
Fantastic.
Actually, I used to say, that used to be my tagline that I would say in a sarcastic way when somebody would say, how are you doing? I'd say, living the dream.
Yeah.
And then I think one day I woke up and realized I actually am living the dream. And then I started to appreciate it more. We have this thing in the group that we're constantly talking about. It's don't wish it away. So when something's, in other words, we're not going to just enjoy the performance, or we're not going to just look forward to the performance. We're going to enjoy the process of getting towards and savor every minute that we can and every measure of music in that preparation period.
Right, right. My motto is success isn't happiness. Happiness is success. Yeah. Yeah. So here you are in Rennie's.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, you're all over. Yeah.
This was the one thing, you know, I said I would never do this because everybody else was doing it. And then the superintendent called me one day and said, don't you think this would be a great idea? And I said, yeah, I guess it would be a great idea. A funny story about this is we were filming another video that same day, and we just decided to go with the flannel. You heard of the band Snarky Puppy?
Say that again?
There's a band called Snarky Puppy.
I don't think I have. Has anybody heard of Snarky Puppy?
Look them up. Look them up. They're phenomenal. And they did this video. We got invited to do this video with them, with like 8 choirs from all around the world. And we all had to submit video, and then they spliced it all together. It's this incredible video with these choirs from all around all around the world. Well, when the choir from Maine comes up, we're proudly wearing our flannel. Yeah, I'll send you that video.
So let's talk just a little bit about schools. How many students are in Windham High School?
About 1,100.
1,100. Yeah. Now, when I was looking online, Windham is actually 12 and the largest in the state for schools. And thinking back on it, if you had stayed, let's say you'd graduated in Holton, stayed in Holton, where in most high schools, chorus has to be taught at 7:30 in the morning because they can't fit it into the day. And other places they have to do it during lunch because that's the only time students can come together because the school district doesn't recognize it as an actual class. Could you have done this when you look at Windham, which is large, in South Portland or Deering or someplace like that? So having a chorus of 100 out of 1,000 is doable. Do you think you could have done this at Holton? Or what do you say to a chorus teacher who wants to do something such as the Windham Chamber Singers, where the arts isn't appreciated as much?
Well, I'm very cautious to say that the arts aren't appreciated. I think there's a perception that the arts get swept under the rug. I don't know that that's as true as maybe as it was 20 years ago.
Okay.
I think the state of choral music is better now than it's ever been.
Good.
It's in Maine. I know it's certainly stronger than when I first started teaching. I was joking with the choir the other day. We were talking about the All-State Choir, and I remember there was in the early 90s, the All-State Choir was doing this passage. It was 2 measures, and they couldn't, 2 measures a cappella, and they couldn't stay in tune. And intonation has gotten so much better in the last 40 years. It really has. But as far as could you do this in another school, I don't know. Because, you see, the model that we've created in the Chamber Singers, that's my passion. And that I'm very blessed to work in a community that supports my passion. Now, if I came in and I had a different passion, they may not be as supportive of that. If I took that passion to another school system where the values were different, where that might not work. So I like to think that my time in Windham has just been this incredible marriage that has worked very, very well. And I love what I do, but I also recognize that I'm able to do some things in Windham that I might not be able to do in other places.
Was it the perfect storm, do you think, all coming together?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And a question that I always ask, when you have large groups or even smaller groups, but does quality produce quantity, or is it the other way around?
I think you have to have a certain quantity to build quality. You can't consistently build an outstanding choir with 9 singers or with 9 girls, unless treble chamber choir is your thing, and for somebody it may be. But if that's all you have, you have to put people in the seats before you can teach them. And I think I know when I first started teaching, that was a big lesson for me, that some of the things I had to do to get students in the seats, because they had this preconceived notion of what choir was. And I had to get them beyond that. And it's really easy to say, oh, well, choir doesn't get support because everybody thinks this, that, or the other thing. But I think as educators, it's our responsibility to fix that mindset or to fix that stereotype. And everybody loves to sing. Yeah. Who doesn't like to sing, right? Especially at Christmas time.
Exactly, I know. Yeah. So one thing we were talking about backstage, and especially when I was working at the college level, I was seeing a lot of students that were coming in who were wishing to pursue a career at the performance level. And in this day and age where performance lifestyles and careers, even for those who have been in that life for decades, are still dependent on that phone call, that phone ringing to say, here is your next performance, and that is your bread and butter. Many of the students really come out of the high school experience with a wonderful, wonderful high. They might have been in the lead of a high school musical, or getting a lot of the solos in chorus, and their parents are very much in support behind them. But it's very, very difficult to find a career in performance. As a high school chorus teacher, how do you approach that question from a very talented student who comes to you and says, Dr. Nick, I'm really looking toward a career in musical performance. What do you think? Do I have it? That's a loaded question, I know.
It's a difficult question. It's a question that every music educator struggles with every day. On the one hand, I mean, if a student comes to you and says, this is what I want to do, you have an obligation to tell them, you're probably not going to make it. And that's not to say that you're not talented enough to make it, but the thing in the performing arts is this definition of making it is very often related to things that you have no control over. You know, whether you've just met the right person at the right time, you've gone to the right party. Because no matter how talented you are, there are 1,000 people who are more talented than you are. I always tell them it's a very difficult way to make a living. You know, when you've got a way, you know, when you're relying on your next role to feed your family. But the other side of that is when somebody has a passion. You tell them that they don't want to go with their passion. You know, Leonard Bernstein said he's never talked anybody going into music, but he's talked a lot of people out of going into music.
Right.
Because if you're going to go into the performing arts, your passion has to be so strong that nobody could ever possibly talk you out of it. And I think a lot of times we lose sight of what's really important. I'll tell you, one of my pet peeves is when students come to me, you know, at a very young age, and they're already tracking what they want to do with their future. You don't know what you want to do with your future yet. And I'm sorry if that sounds drastic, but one of my pet peeves with kids is I see kids today just being dragged from here to there, and they've got dance lessons, and they've got voice lessons, and they've got soccer, and they have no time to be a kid. And then they get on this track and they go to the school of their dreams, and they get there, and then 2 years in they decide, you know what, I don't really want to do this. And then after 2 years, they either transfer to another school or they drop out, and they're already $40,000 in debt, and they've got nothing to show for it. Right. And that's unfortunately a story that we see way too often.
Way too often.
And I know that sounds drastic, but the thing is, in the performing arts, it's not, nobody cares where you went to school. They really don't. When you go into audition, they want to know, what can you do in the audition? Right. So I also recognize that I just totally avoided your question.
No, you nailed it on the head, because I believe in everything you just said, because the next question was about degrees and education and why go into debt if you have the initiative to really get out there and beat the pavement. You know, most of the talented people out there never said, well, I went to, oh, well, then here's your job. Yeah. It doesn't work that way. It did when we were younger. Most of the time in the 80s, it was, where did you go to school first? And then it was, now you're through the door. Now it is, I don't care where you're in school, what can you bring to the table? You know, when you just kept having to beat the table, beat the pavement, and many times when you listen to someone's story as to how they got started, it wasn't just one thing. It was an amalgamation of all kinds of different webs that led someplace. You were in the right place at the right time, or you're doing this, you're doing that, but you never gave up. And my philosophy is always say yes to everything. Just say yes to everything. Yes to everything. Absolutely. Or take a year off, find yourself first, or, you know.
I wish more students did that. You know, we're getting really philosophical now. We have this preconceived idea that when you get to be this age, this is what you have to do. And the fact is, some kids aren't ready for that. Some kids need to take a year off before they, you know, and really discover what they want to do. But it's just, you know, whether it's society or we just say, this is the next step. I'll tell you, I wouldn't want to be a kid today. I would not want to be a high school student today.
But you do have a lot of success stories. There are a lot of your students that have gone on and are out there doing what they want to do and living the dream, as you say.
And a lot of, like I say, I'm not naive enough to think that most of my students are going to go into major music. At the end of the day, my hope is that we've made them better people and people who can make a positive contribution to society. And if they can, no matter what they're doing, that's a success.
Right.
If they're compassionate human beings, that's a good thing.
Yeah. And speaking of living the dream and doing the accolades, you have received many awards. Just to name a few: Maine Music Educator of the Year, Maine Distinguished Choral Director of the Year. You were recognized as one of the top 10 choral directors of note in the United States by Choral Director Magazine, and was nominated for the Music Educator Grammy Award last December, for which you were named a top 10 finalist. So let me ask you, has Dr. Nick taken the Windham Chamber Singers to all these places, or has the Windham Chamber Singers taken Dr. Nick?
I'd say the latter. I always like to give my students credit, yeah, I mean, I tell them that I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for you.
I think that's a very humble response.
No,
yeah.
I mean,
I think that's a Mr. Holland's opus response.
No, I think it's an honest response.
Yeah.
I think the thing is, I mean, awards, say what you will, but the wonderful thing about each of those awards is that somebody had to nominate me, and that's what's touching.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, I've directed choirs and conducted many different choirs of all various styles and sounds and ages, and my personal choice is the same. It will always be the same: students, children's choirs, youth choirs, high school choruses. And that's because the sound that is produced is so pure. To pardon the pun, it's unadulterated. It hasn't been altered by life yet. There's no stress, there's no trauma to it. It's just pure. And to put it into perspective, playing down in Portland, there is the mighty Emmanuel organ, which is half real and half electronic. And to tune the two together, when one was real and one was electronic, you would have to pitch the electronic up to the real. And when the two came into the same wave, it would warble until it became flat.
Yeah.
Now, when you have an older choir, and you have all of those sopranos that have those treble without a pause type voices, it's very difficult to get the sound that you want to produce. But with children and students, the sound is so instantaneous, it's so rewarding, it's so, there's just something about it. Would you choose that choir if you had your over any choir? I mean, do you enjoy that style, that venue, that
I truly
medium?
enjoy working with all age levels.
Do you?
I at some point realized that I think my gift is working with youth choirs.
Yeah.
I do love the innocence. One of the things that I find myself having to deal with more and more with students that audition for the choir is not so much that pure sound, but students trying to imitate what they hear, and that, you know, getting them to step out and discover their own voice. That's not your voice. That's you just, you know, imitating what you're hearing on the radio or what you're seeing on the television. As far as, you know, the adult choirs that you referenced earlier, I think a lot of it comes down to programming and making sure that you're programming repertoire for the ensemble where you can be successful. You're giving the ensemble the opportunity to be successful. You know, if you've got a choir of big operatic type voices and you're programming Palestrina, you know, that's probably not going to work. Right. And if you've got a children's choir and you're programming Brahms, that's probably,
yeah, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Could you please talk about Music with a Mission?
Yes, Music with a Mission. That's another hat I wear is I'm the Minister of Music at the North Windham Union Church. That's something that I've, I think, 9 years. And Music with a Mission is a concert series that we've started to not only raise money for the church, but also a portion of the proceeds for each concert. We have a designated local nonprofit. So we just actually, week before last, finished our sixth season. I'm asking, my wife is also on the committee. Finished our 6th season.
Yep.
And we've put to date over $60,000 back into the community for just different nonprofits. And our criteria is it has to be a nonprofit that helps those in need.
Wow.
So we just, our season finale for the 6th season, we had Reverend Betty Stuckey and her husband Noel Paul Stuckey in their One Light Many Candles program.
Right.
So
great.
It's been, you know, it's been a great way of bringing music into our community and also raising money for a just cause.
Do you ever sleep?
I did once. It was overrated.
Now, you hold alumni reunion concerts with the Windham Chamber Singers.
I do.
And you do it every 5 years.
Yes.
And there are certain pieces, special pieces that you perform. Yeah. One is Sim Shalom,
yeah,
which is this is the Hebrew, which is a blessing. And then there is another one that is Caledonia.
Yes.
Would you please tell the story of Caledonia?
So Caledonia is the ancient, it's what the Romans referred to as what we now know as Scotland. Mm-hmm. And Caledonia was a piece that I discovered when my wife and I were on our honeymoon in Ireland. Yes, I understand that sounds pretentious to say that, but we were on our honeymoon in Ireland, and we were staying at this small town. And I say small because there were no other tourists. We would go off during the day and then come back to this town. And there was like one pub in town, and that's where we'd go. And by about the 3rd night, you understand, pub also was a restaurant.
Right.
Okay? So by about the 3rd night, the locals recognized us and invited us down to the local end of the bar. End of the night, the owner got up, locked the door, came back, he pounds his fist on the bar and says, "Now we sing." And we sang for about 2 hours. And the way they do their pub sings is somebody will sing a verse to a song and then everybody joins in. And then somebody else would do it, and they went around and everybody would sing a song. Well, this one woman sitting next to me sang this piece, Caledonia. It was the most beautiful melody I'd ever heard in my life. I came home, I said, I've got to do that with the choir. Came home, looked it up, I saw that Celtic Women recorded, but there's no SATB arrangement. So I did my own SATB arrangement. Tracked down the composer. When we did the Carnegie Hall show, I wanted to program it at Carnegie Hall. Well, they have this thing at Carnegie Hall that you have to have copyright clearance if you're going to program something. So I had to retroactively get permission to arrange this piece that I'd already arranged. So the songwriter's name, Dougie MacLean, who, as it turns out, is I liken him to James Taylor. He's Scotland's version of James Taylor. And he was just at the Opera House Booth Bay Opera House last year, and we went to see him. And it's such a treat. We got to meet him afterwards, and when I introduced myself, he said, "Now, are you the Richard Nickerson that did the choral arrangement of my Caledonia?" And my head just went. So, but we've got Dougie MacLean coming to Windham in April. He's going to do a concert with our chamber singers. Anyway, back to Caledonia. It's the song speaks to, it's a love song, but it speaks to the love that you feel for where you come from. Mm-hmm. And you know, for the Scots, that love is Scotland. It's their homeland. We discovered in the choir that the choir, as one student put it, the choir is their Caledonia. It's the place where they feel is their home. It's the place where they feel safe. It's the place where they feel accepted. So it's become really kind of a theme song for the choir.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and as I was looking at many, and I was saying this backstage, as I was looking at many of your videos at some of the students, I could tell that on some of the faces that there are certain students within schools that feel safe within their own area of their school, whether it be in sports mm-hmm. or math or academia or mm-hmm. something, where they feel at home within themselves and within their own group.
Yeah.
And there were faces in the videos that when they were singing, they felt as though they were home, and that chorus and that music was their home.
I think that's true of probably every music room in America, or in the world.
Yeah, yeah. That's great. Now, on top of everything else, Dr. Nick, you have the Richard Nickerson Scholarship, which puts on a concert. And could you explain this too?
Yes. This is still a weird one for me, I gotta be honest. I'm just glad it's not the Richard Nickerson Memorial Scholarship.
Okay.
In 1996, which was the Vienna year, at the end of the year, the parents bought me a gift. And the gift was that they established a scholarship in my name. The deal was, they did come to me and say, this is what we want to do, and the deal was I would have nothing to do with it. It carries my name, but I have, it's not my concert. I don't choose the scholarship recipient. And it's kind of a unique idea. The first Saturday of the new year, every year they give a concert. And the concert is alumni. All alumni from Windham High School. It's a big deal in the town. All the funds go to the Richard Nickerson Scholarship. And the scholarship, it's $1,000 each year. They can give 2, they can give 3. And I think they've got it to a point now where the scholarship can be sustained for another 30 years.
Fabulous. Yeah.
And any student who's graduating from Windham High School who participated in choral music and plans to make choral music a part of their experience, not majoring in choral music. So major is irrelevant. If you're a pre-med major, but you're going to sing in your college choir, you're eligible for the scholarship.
Right.
So,
wow.
So that one doesn't cause any work on my part. So,
but still, what a great testament. That's wonderful. All right, well, best part of the whole evening. Yeah. Blue Jays.
Yeah.
When did you become a Blue Jays fan?
1978.
And why?
I grew up in Holton. I've always been a baseball fan.
Always.
Okay.
Right, yeah,
see
there
my
you go.
Sox. I just love the game of baseball. I love it on so many different levels. Growing up in Holton in the days before cable television, the Red Sox were not on. They might be on like on a Saturday afternoon, but that's the only time they were on. The Blue Jays were always on. So I started watching Blue Jays games. And I just fell in love with the team, got to know the players. And as you know, when you get to know the players, you're hooked. And it does occasionally cause some tension in our house. My wife's a Red Sox fan. But then I did my doctorate in Kansas City and had never followed football because I grew up in a part of the world that didn't have football. I didn't really get football. But my doctoral professor, Eve Ely, came into the graduate teaching assistant office one day and said, "Rick, do you like football?" I said, "Not really." He said, "Well, I have an extra ticket to opening day at Arrowhead. Would you like to come?" And I said, "Sure." My first NFL experience was opening day at Arrowhead Stadium, and I've never looked back. I'm a Chiefs fan. So we've got Chiefs and Patriots and Blue Jays, Red Sox. But
yeah, you're still married. Yeah. And we talked a little bit about Torkanowski, so we won't bring him up again. But this is the end of the talk, and I always end it with in the same fashion, which is a 10-question questionnaire.
Oh boy.
Okay. And you can just answer them. Yeah. Do you need a little more?
Yeah. Maybe not water.
You can answer them as long as you'd like to or as short as you'd like to. Okay. Just to get to know you a little bit better. And then we're going to lift up the house lights and you can ask questions of Dr. Nick if you would like to as well. So what is your favorite rock and roll song?
Oh.
Yeah.
Just one?
Just one.
Favorite rock and roll song? That depends on the time. Depends on the. See, I'm a collector of vinyl, and so it depends on what I'm listening.
So am I.
Okay, it depends on what I'm listening to at the time. Favorite rock and roll song. I'm going to go with Xanadu, Rush.
Xanadu. Okay, all right.
Farewell to Kings album.
There you go.
1978.
So flip that over, B-side. What is your favorite choral piece?
Oh, favorite choral piece. I can't just pick one.
You're going to have to. You're on a desert island.
Okay. My favorite one right now is probably the Thomas Tallis, If You Love Me, Keep My Commandments. But that answer would be different if you asked me that tomorrow.
Okay. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Wow. I would have studied harder if I'd... What turns me on creatively?
Spiritually or emotionally?
Yeah. I'm doing one. Creatively, actually just lack of boundaries. Emotionally?
That turned you on?
No, creatively.
What turned you on creatively, emotionally,
Creatively
or
is
spiritually?
just a lack of boundaries, no boundaries.
Oh, okay, that turned you on.
Yeah.
Just endless.
Able to do,
Endless, yeah. Okay. So flip that over. What turned you off?
Negativity.
Okay. What is your favorite sound?
A child's laughter.
Oh, see, I would have thought a crack of a bat. All right. But a child's laughter, okay.
Yeah.
What is your least favorite sound?
I don't know that I have a least favorite sound.
Well, you could go for the obvious.
What's that?
You could go for the obvious and just say a child's cry.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but even that.
No, even that?
Yeah. A child's cry can still be. I remember once we were doing we had Noel Paul Stuckey for our Christmas concert. And in the afternoon show, there was a baby crying, just screaming. And it was to a point where people were starting to get upset. And Noel, in his typical fashion, just smiled and said, I think we have to remember we're all gathered here for a baby. And it just,
if you could perform with any musician, living or dead, who would it be and why?
My wife.
Oh.
Yeah. Because we don't get to perform together. She sung in choirs, and we have this bucket list thing that we're going to someday do a musical together.
Yeah. All right. There we go. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Baseball. Yeah. Not necessarily as a baseball player. I could see myself someday working like as an usher at a baseball park, just being surrounded by the game.
Yeah. Beautiful. How would you like to be remembered?
As someone who had a positive impact on someone's life.
Oh, I think that's going to be a given. And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome home.
There we are. I thank you, Dr. Richard Nickerson, and we're going to bring up the house lights in just a few moments. And if you have any questions for Dr. Nick, please just raise your hand, and we will do that. Any questions at all? If not, then thank you. Oh, yes.
When is your next concert?
Next concert, December 1st. December 1st is our big holiday show. We raise all of our money. We tour every year, and all the money raised for our tours comes from our Christmas concert. We bring in Broadway people and really go all out. We call it an American family holiday. And look us up online, WindhamChambersingers.com. And then after the American Family Holiday, we have 12 shows that we're doing with the Portland Symphony, The Magic of Christmas.
You did a knockout rendition of O Holy Night with Norm Lewis once. That was pretty awesome. Yeah. That was pretty great. Any other questions? No? All right, well, thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Have a good evening. Good night.